Imagine smiling at your children while secretly drowning in 60,000 pounds of suffocating debt. Hiding her identity to escape a social death sentence, one mother faces absolute psychological ruin. Can she claw out of this terrifying abyss? You will not believe the chilling twist at the very end. You are suffocating, not from a physical lack of oxygen, but from the absolute, paralyzing terror that grips your throat as you stare blindly at your end-of-month bank statement. Your heart accelerates into a violent rhythm, your chest constricts, and an invisible malignant tumor of self-loathing expands in your mind as you realize you have just single-handedly shattered your own spending plan. Before we dive into the wreckage, if you have ever felt this exact brand of silent, suffocating panic, please hit the subscribe button right now to support the channel. Your subscription is the lifeline that gives us the motivation to keep unraveling these dark, unspoken truths in future videos. At MoneyGlowUp02 warmly welcomes you to a space where the toxic positivity ends and the brutal reality begins. Throw away the hollow financial theories immediately. Burn the patronizing advice about skipping your daily cup of coffee and delete those flawlessly pristine Excel spreadsheets that internet financial gurus use to preach their gospel of perfection. Today, we are stepping into the raw, savage, and terrifyingly messy world of a mother staggering under the crushing weight of over 60,000 pounds in debt. This is not a fairy tale about achieving financial freedom on a sun-kissed beach. This is a live, unanesthetized psychological surgery, completely exposing the phenomenon known as the mid-year wobble. It is a dark, agonizing corner of the human mind, a liquidity blood clot in the bloodstream of financial discipline that almost no expert dares to touch because it is simply too ugly to be packaged into a $1,000 masterclass. The mid-year wobble is that devastating moment when the fiery, unstoppable motivation of January simply evaporates into thin air, leaving you entirely exposed to the corrosive acid of daily survival. This debt update is not a sanitized financial report. It is a desperate cry for help, a raw confession from a human being playing a lethal game of Jenga with her own life. You might wonder why our protagonist hides behind the cold, anonymous letters of H and J. Do not rush to judge her. A 60,000 pounds mountain of debt is not just a mathematical figure. It is a severe social death sentence. The invisible barrier of societal stigma is so massive that publicly revealing her identity would be tantamount to throwing herself into a devastating margin call of her social life, a place where the trust and respect of friends and family would be forcibly liquidated in an instant. The crippling fear of being judged is a toxic, negative asset, continuously accruing interest in the darkest corners of her mind. By choosing anonymity, she is frantically erecting a final defensive perimeter to protect whatever fragile fragments of self-esteem she has left. Yet, in doing so, she highlights an extraordinary, agonizing bravery. She is daring to expose her deepest scars, laying bare the absolute chaos of her personal life in a desperate search for salvation. This anonymity is not an act of cowardice. It is a fundamental survival tactic for a woman currently drowning in the abyss of debt, gasping for a single, life-saving breath of air. To truly understand why this mother is currently drowning in the dark waters of a mid-year crisis, we must first look back at the insidious, quiet currents that originally pulled her under. That staggering mountain of 60,000 pounds did not materialize overnight in a spectacular blaze of reckless luxury. It grew like a silent mold in the damp corners of everyday survival. It began with the seemingly innocuous swipe of a credit card to cover a minor emergency, a broken boiler, a sudden medical expense, a terrifying gap between paychecks that just would not close. Then came the creeping normalization of borrowing just to keep the lights on and the pantry stocked. We are conditioned by society to believe that massive debt is the result of moral failure or lavish vacations. But for our anonymous protagonist, it was the agonizing accumulation of 1,000 desperate, tiny decisions made in the name of keeping her family afloat. The predatory compounding interest quietly went to work, turning a manageable puddle of debt into a raging, uncrossable river. She was sold the illusion of middle-class stability, a hollow dream financed entirely by plastic cards and invisible lines of credit that promised salvation but delivered absolute servitude. Every single month, she traded a vital piece of her future for a fleeting moment of present-day peace, desperately hoping her income would somehow magically outpace the soaring cost of living. It never did. The trap snapped shut slowly, so slowly that she did not realize she was imprisoned until the walls of minimum payments began crushing the life out of her monthly income. She became an involuntary master of financial gymnastics, moving balances from one predatory lender to another, playing a sickening game of musical chairs where the music was always on the verge of stopping. That slow, agonizing accumulation of systemic regret eventually built the towering house of cards that her mid-year wobble so effortlessly blew down. The mid-year collapse is not merely a mathematical error on a ledger. It is the ultimate, devastating breaking point of human endurance. Back in January, armed with fresh determination and an aggressively color-coded spreadsheet, she swore this year would be different. She stripped her budget down to the bare bones, cutting out every conceivable joy, every minor comfort, forcing herself into a financial straitjacket to aggressively attack the principal balance. But human psychology is not a machine that can run on severe deprivation indefinitely. By July, the sheer grinding fatigue of constantly saying no began to violently erode her willpower. The catalyst for the wobble was not a grand, foolish purchase. It was the suffocating exhaustion of hypervigilance. A tire blew out on the highway. The kids desperately needed new clothes for a growth spurt, and suddenly, the perfect spreadsheet shattered into a million irrecoverable pieces. In a moment of absolute psychological burnout, the rigid discipline gave way to a brief, catastrophic wave of apathy. She ordered takeout because she was physically too exhausted to cook after a 14-hour day of worrying. She missed a payment because merely looking at the banking app induced a literal panic attack. The mid-year wobble is the terrifying moment when the rubber band of extreme frugality finally snaps back, stinging you with the realization that you cannot budget your way out of a fundamentally broken financial reality. The illusion of control evaporated overnight, leaving behind a toxic residue of shame and the paralyzing fear that all the brutal sacrifices of the past 6 months were entirely for nothing. Yet, the most devastating aspect of this mid-year collapse is not the shattered math glowing on the screen. It is the agonizing collateral damage inflicted upon the innocent lives caught in the crossfire. Being a mother while bearing the crushing weight of 60,000 pounds in debt is a unique, suffocating breed of psychological torture. Every single interaction with her children is tainted by the underlying, humming anxiety of financial ruin. When they ask for a simple $2 treat at the grocery store, she does not just see a piece of candy. She sees a direct threat to their basic security, a painful, glaring reminder of her own perceived failures. The guilt is an invasive parasite, relentlessly eating away at her maternal joy. She forces bright, hollow smiles during family dinners, masking the sheer panic that courses through her veins as she mentally calculates whether the electricity will stay on through the weekend. The invisible toll of this debt manifests in the dead of night, where she lies awake, staring blankly at the ceiling, her chest tight with the terrifying thought that she is fundamentally failing the people she loves most. The debt robs her of the present moment, dragging her mind into terrifying future scenarios of eviction and destitution while her children play happily right in front of her. She is physically present in their lives, but financially and emotionally held hostage in a suffocating prison of her own making. The mid-year wobble did not just break her meticulously crafted budget. It violently fractured her belief in her ability to protect her family, layering an unbearable blanket of imposter syndrome over her sacred role as a mother. Staring at the shattered pieces of her financial life and the sleeping faces of her children, she realizes with brutal clarity that surrender simply is not a luxury she can ever afford. The mid-year wobble has broken her down to her absolute core. But from the darkness of this absolute rock bottom, a new, grittier form of resilience must inevitably be forged. There is no magical bailout coming from the sky, no winning lottery ticket, no sudden miraculous inheritance to wipe the slate clean. There is only the long, grueling, and deeply unglamorous trench warfare of clawing her way back to a zero balance. She is finally throwing away the toxic fantasy of the flawless spreadsheet and replacing it with a scarred, battle-tested survival strategy that actually accounts for human frailty and exhaustion. She is actively learning the agonizing process of forgiving herself for the wobble, understanding that messy relapses are a tragic but inevitable part of recovering from profound, systemic financial trauma. This channel and this anonymous, unvarnished confession is her officially declaring war on the suffocating shame that has kept her silent and paralyzed for years. By sharing her darkest failures with this community, she is violently dragging the monster of debt out from under the bed and into the harsh light of reality, where it can finally be dismantled, piece by agonizing piece. The road ahead will be measured in years of relentless grinding, in hundreds of tiny, painful daily sacrifices, and in the quiet, unyielding dignity of simply refusing to give up. We are not here to sell you a shiny dream of rapid wealth. We are here to walk beside a mother bravely marching through hell. The devastating journey of this mother is not just a cautionary tale about the perils of compounded interest. It is a raw, unflinching mirror reflecting the silent financial pandemic gripping millions. Her story obliterates the pervasive myth that massive debt is born solely from moral failing or frivolous greed. Instead, it exposes the systemic trap of surviving in an unforgiving economy, where the cost of basic existence outpaces the means to provide it. The mid-year collapse she suffered was not a failure of character, but the inevitable breaking point of a flawed, unsustainable strategy of absolute deprivation. By attempting to force human psychology into the rigid, unforgiving lines of a spreadsheet, she set herself up for a catastrophic rebound. Yet, it is precisely within the wreckage of this mid-year wobble that true financial redemption begins. Stripped of the illusion of control and the toxic pursuit of perfection, she has unearthed a battle-tested resilience. She is no longer hiding behind the suffocating veil of maternal shame or the agonizing fear of judgment. Her confession is a radical act of defiance against a financial system that profits heavily from silence and isolation. She is choosing the grueling, unglamorous path of authentic recovery, accepting that stumbling is an inherent, unavoidable part of the climb out of the abyss. Her narrative stands as a powerful testament to the unyielding strength of a parent's love, proving that while debt may relentlessly attack a family's peace of mind, it can never entirely extinguish the fierce, burning resolve to fight for a better tomorrow. The lesson: extreme frugality driven by shame and perfectionism is a guaranteed recipe for psychological collapse. The belief that you must ruthlessly punish yourself to overcome financial hardship only creates a volatile pressure cooker that will inevitably explode. True financial recovery is not a rigid sprint of flawless discipline. It is a marathon of messy, human endurance that requires grace, flexibility, and radical self-forgiveness. How to apply it today? Look at your own financial strategies or personal goals and immediately discard the fantasy of perfection. Build a budget that actually accounts for human fatigue, emergency burnouts, and emotional limits. Allow small, intentional margins for rest or modest joy so you do not snap under the weight of constant deprivation. If you experience a wobble or relapse, do not let it spiral into a catastrophic failure fueled by shame. Treat it as a mere data point. Forgive yourself immediately and reset the very next day. Most importantly, break the silence. Share your reality with a trusted community because financial trauma thrives in the dark and loses its power in the light of shared human connection. What is one small, realistic way you give yourself grace when you slip up on your personal goals or budget? Please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below so our community can learn from your perspective and support one another. If this story resonated with you, please hit the subscribe button to support the channel. It gives us the motivation to keep creating honest, impactful content for you.